questions then, come on. Yep, and yep will do for now too. Go.
So, provided your compassion is...
By the way, are there any questions coming from Facebook? We should know and check it out. How do we know?
I know there haven't been.
There haven't been, okay. Go.
Not yet.
Provided the motivation is compassion, at work I have to judge people. So I form, I work in manufacturing, I have to form a team
Yes.
to create, a project,
That's right. Yes.
And I pick my team according
Yes.
to their qualities.
That's right. I mean, that's not compassion, that's wisdom.
Okay. So
Wisdom.
I'm not creating negative karma by going, well, I don't want him because he's not the right fit for this team.
Well, you have to decide what your motivation is.
Yeah, okay.
And that's wisdom.
Okay.
And the real point is the more you know your mind, the more you know your attachment, your anger, your fears, your confusion, your arrogance, your jealousy, the more your kindness, your intelligence, the more you know someone else. So the key is wisdom, and that informs your ability. And it's a very dependent thing, because it depends on not just their good qualities. They might have good qualities, but it's got to suit everybody. It's a whole package, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
So you've got to have wisdom,
All right.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was talking with someone else, and I've watched a few of your other talks where the topic about the whole vegetarian and non-killing.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
I guess the way I look at it is the best thing we can do, rather than looking at food, because you pointed out that, for example, all the insects in the field will
You'll die for the veggies even.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Should we just be aiming to sort of harm minimise, basically?
That's the point. That's
Yeah.
the big. That's the biggest
rather
picture.
than stop eating meat.
No, well, I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah. For centuries, there's always been this division between whether you eat meat or whether you don't. It's a way we decide. So it's sort of, in a sense, it's fairly arbitrary, isn't it? Because it's fairly arbitrary, because if we're thinking it from the point of view of creatures dying, then it's not relevant. I mean, it is relevant, especially in this world, because the meat industry is so appalling. And that's a very particular point. The meat industry is destroying the planet, apparently. I mean, you read all the stories, you hear about that. But if you take it from the point of view of not harming, then you can't ever think that sentient beings don't suffer just when you eat eat vegetables.
Mm.
So a part of it, my thing, and I always talk about it this way, and it's always controversial, I always get messages from people saying I'm ridiculous. Never mind. I think because we're so attached to food, you understand, we're attached to eating.
Yep.
So there's this big thing, if you eat the flesh, that's monstrous. But when I point out things like, I always remember one ABC scientist in Melbourne talked about some wheat field. It must be all over the world like this, where you grow wheat, obviously. And in the off-season, millions of cute little mice gather there. And he talked about them, these cute little field mice, and they sing love songs to each other, he said. He had photos of them, right? So, of course, when you have to grow the wheat, what do? You slaughter the lot. Now, even when I put that story on one time on Facebook, someone said, well, you can't help that. But excuse me, what's the motivation for killing all the field mice? The motivation for slaughtering the field mice, millions of them, is so you can grow wheat. Now, who's the wheat for? The holy vegetarians and vegans. But 20% maybe for the bulls, for the meat eaters. But 80%, maybe 50% maybe is for the vegetarians and the vegans. So how can you possibly avoid seeing that to get your holy wheat, millions of creatures were slaughtered? But just because you don't eat the flesh, that's the part that seems to make us panic. And it's very bizarre to distinguish it that way. Can you see my point? If millions of beings die, whether you eat them or not, it's hardly the issue. But we're so attached to eating. It's like, and I think when we become very obsessive with it, you get people, really fundamentalists, get obsessive. Don't take that disgusting meat out of my house. Yeah. That's evil. I mean, that's not compassion, that's called anger. It's like this horror. I mean, even if you get an OXO cube, what do we have in this country? Yeah, OXO cubes?
Yeah.
Of course it's got some meat, something in it. But we say, oh, I'm not going to eat that. That's got, excuse me, what's going to happen? You're going to die? I mean, for me, that's a bit irrational, quite frankly. Are you seeing my point here? That's my personal opinion. But the broader picture is to alleviate to lessen as much as we can actions to harm sentient beings. So if that does include not eating meat, then go for it. But it doesn't mean you're not holy. Creatures are going to die no matter what. I mean, even one thing I always put on when someone got upset with me. So I put this years ago. I put a picture of me buying some kick-ass cheddar from a shop in Liverpool in the UK, and all the fundamentalist vegans, including one of my friends. How dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese? Blah blah blah. Whatever. So I didn't want to be political. So I'd always wondered how many little bugs get killed on the road when you drive. You understand? Well, you Google it, someone's done the research, I promise. So sure enough, some Dutch fellow, I forget all the exact details, but it's like just on the number plate, per car, per kilometre. I mean, it's like trillions, and they're sentient beings, they're real beings who've been humans and dogs in past lives, Buddha would say, and they get slaughtered. So this one person said, well, that can't help that. But that's kind of irrational. So in one sense, we can't help it. Just by the biggest picture in Buddhism, the bigger picture point of view would say, the entire universe is pervaded by living beings. Some so tiny we can't see them even with microscopes. I mean, our body, we know this, is a walking zoo. Just under our armpit, our mouth is an entire ecosystem of sentient beings. Because we can't see them and they haven't got cute little, bushy tails and two little eyes or something, we don't care. But they're sentient beings for the Buddha. They're all sentient beings. So we do what we can. But to have the idea that because you stop eating meat, somehow you're not harming sentient beings is just plain absurd. Is the bigger point. So we've got to get a bigger picture and have there's two things. There's two things from the Buddhist point of view. The very first level of practice is to abide by the laws of karma, and the purpose is to stop you creating more negative karma. It's completely for your sake, and that's just plain common sense. So if you think you've got to stop, it's sort of like the analogy is you've got to help people with their health. That means you've got to help people giving you advice about nutrition. Well, the first step you have to take for nutrition is eat properly yourself. And it's got to be so that you can become helpful to others, but it's for your sake too. Same here. You stop harming others for your sake, and then you're able to help others do the same. So the key point has to be that we lessen as much as we can the actions that I will do to harm sentient beings for my sake first. Don't ever put that down. But then, and then you do what you can. So even though you're still slaughtering creatures by living and walking and driving, you'll become much more conscious of it, and then gradually, inevitably, you're going to get such compassion. So, when you're driving cars, just the way the world is now. Lama Zopa, when I was working in San Francisco for our prison project, and we bought from Rinpoche, his house was not far away. He had where his nuns live and take care of his jobs and things, in Aptos, in California. We bought this old, big, what do we call them, SUVs there? What do we call them here?
Four-wheel drive.
Same. I was becoming American SUVs, four-wheel drive, whatever it's called. This big kind of Ford, and it was covered in mandalas and mantras and holy sayings. So because Rinpoche's logic is that millions of creatures are going to bump into the car and die, splat and die, at least they get a blessing from the mantras. I mean, you can take that or leave it, but at least you become more aware, and you can't stop breathing in creatures, you can't stop by walking on the ground, you do your best, but if you're really going to think that you can never kill a living being, you might as well die now. It's just not possible. Impossible. But I think we've got so much, my view, there's so much attachment to food that if you eat it, that's the biggest sin. We get hysterical when it comes to that, but we ignore the other actions, which is just, for me, emotional and irrational. Are we communicating people? I mean, we do what we can, that's all. And mind our own business, please. Stop giving people lectures, mind your own business, That's really important. Be fundamentalist about it. Yeah, Susanna.
Just adding on to what Ed said, like in the house, collecting spiders and catching them and not killing them and things like that. But in Australia, what if, there's a spider, like a redback spider? I don't know, like...
You mean because it harms others, we should kill it, is the logic?
Well...
That's your logic, this is what you're suggesting. Is that right?
Well, that's the question.
No, I know, but yes, I understand. No, I understand.
It's like a dilemma.
Well, I mean, if you can stop any creatures out there from harming each other, including each other, not just humans. I mean, creatures are slaughtering each other all the time, but we only worry if they hurt humans, for a start. This is assumed in there. So then, think a bit bigger. Creatures live in harming each other. They just destroy each other all the time. That's what they do. That's how they live. They torture and harm and kill each other all the time. Some happen also to harm humans. So we do what we can to avoid, and this is the interesting point, when you've got compassion, you'd even do it if something you do to help the redback stop harming others would be for the redback's sake as much as anything, because it's going to create negative karma. So you do what you can, but we can't be God. We're not God. We can't make it all perfect. So we do what we can. But so one point is always to protect yourself from creating negative karma. And even if you do things by accident or do feel you have to do something, try and do it with a pure motivation, at least, so you don't put too much negative karma in your own mind, and then do what you can to not harm. We can't guarantee one creature won't harm another. You just can't guarantee that. You can't guarantee that cat won't kill the mouse if it gets it, So we do our best with wisdom. but always with the purest motivation, for the sake of the creature as much as for other people. We do what we can. But best not to kill. I mean, play safe. Don't try not to kill. That's the point. Try not to kill. It doesn't mean others won't kill them. That's not the point. It's to try and protect ourselves first, and then out of compassion do what's wise for others. Do you understand? That's the point. Yes, Andrew.
So considering, I guess, ignorance or intelligence is on a spectrum, and we're all ignorant, at what point do you know you're wise, or should you not say anything at all? When does that, how does that?
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. I mean, but it's hard to get it. To someone else, you mean? To say something to someone else?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sorry.
You mean to tell them off?
Not to tell them off, but just
To do what then?
I guess to share that them. I guess.
Yeah, you tell them off, basically.
Yeah, okay.
Come on, Andrew. Come on. You like pointing out people's stories, and that's okay because you're an intelligent guy and you can see those things. You mean telling a person their fault. Basically is what you say. Thank you very much. Okay, the wisdom wing goes, the wisdom wing, we've talked about this, you know that. The wisdom wing, if you're being really strict, try and hear this, the really clear way to practice the wisdom wing is for your benefit. The wisdom wing is to lessen your negative karmic imprints in your mind, to lessen the actions you do that will harm others that create negative karma for you, to lessen the actions that will harm you. That's the bottom line for the wisdom wing. So whatever you say and do from the wisdom wing perspective has to be something that you would say or do that would help minimize your delusions and help minimize your suffering. So from the point of view of speech, you telling someone else off for something they did wrong is not your business. It's very simple. Shut your mouth and look at your delusions.
Yeah.
So now, from the compassion wing point of view, the only reason to speak is for the sake of the person who's hearing the words. So if it's going to be pointing out a person's fault, well, my suggestion first is, my first thought is it's a contingent thing. What's your relationship with this person? Now, if they're a child, you have a right to tell them off and you have a responsibility, but it's got to come from compassion for them, not just being a smarty pants. So if we have a friend, a close friend, that's another relationship. You have a parent, that's another relationship. You have a boss. It's all a question of what your relationship is. I mean, you can't walk in, it's very unusual, you walk into your boss's office telling him giving us mistakes. It's best to keep yourself quiet, please, and shut up. But if it's a colleague, if it's an equal, if it's your beloved, there's a different time, different places, you know. But the general reason to say something to someone else, it has to be for their benefit, Andrew. But we think it is, but we just act, it's just coming out of our own arrogance. Because we love, I mean, not just you, but all of us. So you've got to be very wise to do that. But if you can really handle your own part of itself, if you really can work on your own anger and your own resentment and own hurt, I swear to you, this is really true now, once you have dealt with that, then there is no longer a problem. So you won't even care to tell them off because you know you've solved your problem. But we think it's solving our problem to tell the other person what they did to upset me. That's how we have all our problems. So to really deal with in your own mind, you won't even care if you tell them. You'll just relax because now you've solved the problem. That's a fact. And if you try that, it's profound.
So, question, like, I take that, I hear that. So then at what point do you go then, that if it's all, you're all trying to practice that, and that everything's them and that's you, and then at what point does some of that become, I guess you kind of become like a doormat, or that you always...
No,
not a doormat,
no, you don't become a doormat. You don't become a doormat. No, this is what's supposed to be over here. If I have solved my problem with anger, truly, really, and this is high, this is profound, or my jealousy, and I have made a decision to stay in this relationship with you, and I've really made a decision to practice on my own mind and stop my attachment to my annoyance and my irritation, then in that sense, I have solved the problem. I have solved my problem. I don't have a problem. Then it would be genuine compassion for me to point something out to you. And that would be easy, but it would come from compassion. And that's appropriate. That's appropriate. You've got a bodhisattva vow to help somebody. Then it's appropriate. If you really see that what they're doing is harming them, not harming you. I mean, you don't become a doormat. A doormat is a person who's a victim, who's got attachment and neediness and expectations and fears. That's a doormat. If you don't have that, nothing can harm you. It's water off a duck's back. So, I really mean that sincerely.
So the way I hear that is that if someone's in a DV relationship, let's say, a domestic violence relationship.
Domestic DV. So just a minute, you just can you use ordinary words, please? In a relationship where one person bullies another.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you the victim or the bully? Which
You'd
one?
be the victim.
You're the victim. Okay, what's the question?
So then, if you're really practicing these things, you would understand that that's your karma to get hit because you've hurt someone or you've hurt this person
Yeah.
before in your life.
Uh-huh.
So therefore, you would take that, trying to understand it's your karma. You would then try and be with them at the same time because you understand. That
Okay, the only
then you're
reason
going out.
you would stay in a relationship where you're being abused, let's say, the only reason is because you really thought about it and you know there's some long-term benefit for both of you to be in that relationship. And that's a pretty high thing.
Yeah.
To be in a relationship where you're the victim of a bully and to be not a victim, that's a pretty high relationship. That's an advanced kind of person. That'd be a bodhisattva. A normal person, given the ordinary way that we are, the first step, the victim who's a victim is like it will be trodden upon and beaten and abused daily. Because a victim is a person with attachment and neediness and fears and jealousy and anger and rage and blame. But they have no courage, and that's join the universe here, we're all victims. No, they have all these fears, and oh no, he really does love me, beat. You just keep coming back like a moth to a flame. That's not kindness, that's not even compassion, that's stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
That's outrageous. So the first step has to be, I've got to get the hell out of this relationship. This is insane. So the first step for a victim is realizing you've got to stop getting abused, get the hell out. If you're at the point where you're a bodhisattva or highly realized and you've made the decision it's a good relationship for various reasons, it would be water off a duck's back. No problem. I always quote my friend, my mother's friend. My daddy was a bit of an old drinker, and in the old days with racing, they used to have SP bookies. Did your daddy do SP booking? Okay, SP bookers. Australians know about that. So my father was always betting his money and drinking alcohol. So one of his friends was his SP bookie in Heidelberg, and he was an old drunk, Reg, and he had many, and he owned. This is bad mouthing people. Anyway, my father and he were good mates. They drank together, and my father did SP booking with him and did his loss on money on the horses, whatever. But Reg was this kind of typical bully. He was an alcoholic. He was arrogant, and his wife Sheila, who was a Catholic, was my mother's best friend. So Sheila was as skinny as a rake. She lived on 80 cigarettes a day, Marlboros, I think, and like bread and butter, and 47 cups of tea a day. But she was this funny, wonderful, joyous, happy, delightful human being. She was completely in love with God. She had total faith in God. Everybody was in God. I mean, God was in everybody. God was in Reg, and God was in her crazy kids or whatever. But she was absolutely the opposite of a victim. So Reg would come home at drunk at lunchtime and jump on her at lunchtime. She'd be having a cigarette while he's jumping on her. She couldn't. I mean, less than careless. You've got to realise some people don't mind and don't care. It looks on the face of it like she was a victim. She was not a victim. So him jumping on her, it was like less than nothing. It was really less than nothing. So the only way to understand that, which we don't in our system, in our culture, she was not a victim. She loved Reg and thought he was ridiculous, and God was in Reg. So it was water off a duck's back. So therefore she could not be harmed by Reg. Not possible, Andrew. And she had power. She had a click of fingers. He did what she wanted, She had complete power. A victim is why we suffer. Do you hear that? So whatever her reason, it was no question, it was a no-brainer. She would never leave him. It was just she was a wife, she was a Catholic, she had 5 children, she needed the money, so she lived her life perfectly. And I loved going to visit Sheila, because she had 5 sons. But second, because she was just funny. I mean, if she was sitting in there moaning, complaining about a horrible husband, when you're young, you don't want to go near people like that. They're too boring. But she was this funny, delightful. I adored Sheila because she always praised you and say how beautiful you were. I mean, I loved going to Sheila's house. She was not a victim, therefore she didn't suffer. She didn't suffer, Andrew. Is that clear? Can you hear that? I think all of us can hear that. And this is the interesting point. It's something very hard for our minds because we're so into the victim thing. When there's no fear, there's no suffering. So I remember even one example. I mean, I have several examples, but I'll just tell you one. This time I always tell this story, when I got held up by a gun in New York. And normally that's going to be a situation where you fear for whatever reason, don't ask me why, I'm a strange personality, I wasn't afraid. In fact, I became the aggressor. I told this fellow off. He was sitting this close, and he put a gun here. It was a funny story. Janet and I, my sister Janet, we'd be living in London, and we were these kind of radical lefties. We'd go, we're stealing, we'd go shoplifting. Very, very low level shoplifting. We'd go down Oxford Street at Christmas time and go into Selfridges and steal a few presents and send them home to Christmas, I mean, very low. We're sort of thinking we're stealing from the rich for the poor. That was whatever. So Janet was a bit into shoplifting. And so we went to New York in 1974 after doing that, and whatever. We were walking down the Lower East Side, coming home at 2 in the morning after we'd been in this Irish bar. We're just going home, and Janet had a glass of wine. She just took a glass of wine. She was still stealing, It was a hilarious scenario, but out of the blue, this young dude came up, put a gun here between my breasts. I always remember, I'd never seen a gun before. I always remember, like, reading in novels, cold, grey metal. And I thought to myself, cold, grey metal. And it was. And then I remember him saying, give me your money, bitch, that one. Give me your money, bitch. That's what he said. He was this close, he was this close. Well, I get kind of outraged when people attack me. How dare they? Whatever reason, but my point is this. So he ended up, for me, I get very logical. I thought, how absurd. We're as poor as him. I said, you man, excuse me, we're as poor as you. You give us your money. So in the end, I was like, so ridiculous. He didn't know what to do with that, I mean, and he didn't know what to do with it. So he kept saying, give me your money, because Janet kept saying, hey brother, have some wine. And in the end, it was just absurd, It was completely ridiculous. And my point is this. He walked away with his tail between his legs, got nothing from us, And in the end, that was my party story. So all I'm saying is but in hindsight, after the fact, what I learned even then, when there's no fear, there's no suffering. That's what I learned. So I'm not recommending you try and get held up to see how it happens. For whatever reason it happened. And that was a powerful learning for me. So Sheila's another example. But this is dangerous territory for us in our culture, because we feel then, well, how dare, I remember one person saying, it sounds like you're putting the onus on the victim to change. I remember one person in some article about, the Me Too business, that what do you mean the woman should change? The man should change. That's true. It's true. Men should stop raping their wives. I agree. But what if they don't, is the point. Then you might as well stop being a victim. And so then there's a series of things. If you're already a victim, you're going to suffer mightily. If she started at some point would make a decision, is it best to stay or go? She made, for her reasons, it's best to stay. But it was water off a duck back. She didn't suffer. She didn't suffer. This is the point. And she loved Reg because God was in Reg, and whatever. So you've got to have some wisdom and know what we can handle, Andrew. If you're not at that level, you don't sit there. That's not practice. Taking the punches and being full of rage and victim mentality is not. But when you're such a victim, the irony, the tragedy is you don't have any power to make any decision whatsoever, including leaving. The wisest thing to do is get the hell out of that relationship. But we don't. We go back like a moth to a flame, don't we? And then we blame. So if we can have the courage to know we could leave that job anytime, we could leave that relationship anytime, but we might as well be in prison because we really believe we can't leave it. That's the victim mentality. No fear, no choice. And that's why we suffer.
So what happens if you see that job or whatever as a way to train how to kind of get to that stage?
Yeah, there you do. That's fantastic. That's your choice. All I'm saying is make a choice. Go or stay. That's it. That's it. If you can handle it. If you can handle it, you do it. You have to know your mind well. You have to know your mind, Andrew. And if you pretend you're working on it, but that person's abusing you and you're going more crazy, then you don't know your mind. We have to know where we're at. This is crucial. Can't you give a point?
I can.
Where's the doubt then? You sound like you're so doubting.
There's no doubt. It's just my doubt would be that you could make life like that. Your whole life could
I don't like what?
To play that.
Excuse me, you're not playing anything, Andrew. Keep it down. Relax. This is the Bodhisattva practice. The Bodhisattva practice is that you've got such courage, such independence, such contentment, such joy, that everything that comes to you is grist for the mill. You can't avoid problems, but you're able to eat them up and turn them into virtue. That's your job, Andrew. Not just abusive partners. Every day we're complaining and moaning about somebody upsetting us. It's completely taking all those situations. That's the most advanced level. Take all those situations, grist for your mill, and you'll get quickly enlightened, I promise. But you've got to know where you're at. First level, control your body and speech. Next one, control your mind. Then develop compassion. It's progressive, incremental. You've got to know where you're at and what is a wise choice. Do you understand?
Yeah, but that's the hard part, I guess, knowing.
Well, it's not difficult. It's not hard, Andrew. It's not hard. It's like, the trouble is now, because we're very intelligent, we can talk the teachings at a very theoretical level, can't we? But that's a bit like talking theoretical level of music, but not distinguishing between theoretical music and playing music. So you can never get confused about what you can play. But we get confused about intellectual knowledge and experiential knowledge because it's both your mind. And so we might conflate, we might think by having intellectual knowledge we're at that level. We're not.
Yeah.
We've got to know where we're at. And so that's genuine wisdom. You've got to have humility to know that. Because it's most a danger to have all this intellectual knowledge but not know what we experientially know. That's the big point.
Then, Borabina, there is a couple of questions from someone on Facebook.
Good.
So it's Libania Love Light.
Libania.
Libania.
Hello, Libania, darling.
And there's a couple of parts to the question. So do you want me to read
Mhm.
the parts?
Mm-hmm.
So it says, during the practice of the sadhana, if you see light and then you also see the dark stuff, is the dark stuff the negative stuff of your mind? And the dark stuff meaning dark forces or maras or malignant spirits? Part 2.
Okay, that'll do for now.
Yep.
Darling, Libania, I don't quite understand what you mean, Libania, but seeing light and dark stuff. If you're talking about your own mind and seeing your delusions, that's the dark stuff, that's fantastic. But if you're thinking it's other beings outside forcing you, external beings, and that's a different discussion, so you have to be more clear with me what you mean.
Second question is, during the practice of your sadhana, if you get immense fear out of the blue, how do you overcome this?
You stop the sadhana, you open your eyes and go for a walk.
And when you are aware of your thoughts are negative, what tools can you use to overcome it?
Well, that's what we're discussing here right now, Libania. First you control your body and speech. Then we see the delusions. And then when you're going to hear, we're going to talk about this coming soon, when we hear the anger or the fears or the jealousy, we're going to not just have the feeling, which is the tip of the iceberg, we're going to hear the conceptual story that informs the anger, that informs the fear, that informs the jealousy. And when you're going to hear the conceptual story, which is a series of thoughts, you argue with them by using wisdom and virtue. That's being your own therapist every day. That's being a Buddhist. Any other questions? Yes, sweetheart.
So, obviously, speaking badly about others is considered to contribute to bad karmic.
For yourself, it harms yourself. You put poison
Yeah.
in your mind, you get upset, you get unhappy, and not to mention harming others.
Correct. So if you're talking badly about someone else, however, and Me Too is probably a good example, I was originally thinking about something a bit more personal, is all of these women were going around having these individual negative experiences with this man, but because they weren't talking to each other, they
This is
weren't
a
actually...
real experience.
Yeah,
Some
well,
women
I'm
were being
talking about
abused.
Me Too now.
Oh, okay,
but,
so you mean a
like,
woman-
so when you're talking to someone else about your negative experience with this negative person,
Yes.
or this person,
Yes.
there's a sense of community that can come out of that then can get you to kind of rise up and change.
I understand. Yeah, but that's easy. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So that's talking from the point of view of doing something about getting the man to be imprisoned.
And sometimes you don't know yourself. Some people don't know that the experience they've had is communal and other people have experienced it.
I know,
They're
so
not
there's
quite sure
different...
it's negative.
Okay, so there's different things here.
Yeah.
All that discussion is about people coming together and then exposing a certain harmer. And that's what it's all about, external problems, isn't it? And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. I'm not discussing that. But the first one, the point we're talking here from the point of view of the wisdom wing, is learning from our own experiences. So if we know we've had a relationship with this particular man and it's been abusive, then learning to have the courage to stop going without him, to stop seeing him, to learn from your own mind, keep away from him. So that's the first step. It's obvious. If you're in an abusive relationship, get the hell out, please. But that's the first step already. That's amazing and courageous. And then if you're being a Buddhist, you learn to deal with your own jealousy, your own anger, your own resentment, your own pain, your own fears. You take on the view of karma, and then you heal yourself with that. So now this next step is, we're talking about a serial abuser, like the whole business of Weinstein and everything, Weinstein, right? But that's another whole discussion. You've got to decide yourself whether you want to be involved in that. Because, that's another discussion, I think.
But because you're going to have a conversation with someone in order to
No,
connect
right,
the
right.
dots.
No, that's assuming, but I don't want to discuss that part.
Yeah.
That's your business. If you want to decide to come together with other people and expose a person for harming, I think that's fine. That could be very, but it's got to come from if you're going to do that, it's got to come from a good place. It's got to come from, and this is really hard. Ideally, it's got to come from genuine compassion for that person as well as for the people who are being harmed. But that's very rare. It comes for us out of anger and bitterness and righteousness and resentment, and the more he suffers, the more happy we are. That's unfortunate. That's the unfortunate part. But that's really difficult. Like you think, well, look at all the thing with all the abusive priests,
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. It's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
So to talk about having compassion for those priests after they've abused you, that sounds like that's the wickedest thing to say in our culture. But, you know, each person has got to work on their own thing. But it's hard to say to do it out of compassion because we think it's got to come from anger. And it's righteous and good to be angry. But the Buddhist point of view from the compassion, the Buddhism wing is you harm yourself. If you're a victim, if you're angry, if you're resentful, this is a key point. And it's hard to hear this. In our culture, we don't think this way. We've got to see, do I want to harm myself? But that doesn't mean you don't decide to still expose the priest, but it'll be out of compassion. That's the ideal. So everything comes down to what your motivation is. But for our world, that's very shocking. That seems too ridiculous. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get that.
Is that enough for you? Is that answering your questions? Yeah. So the talking to each other is another discussion. Listen. If I'm angry with Ed and you're my girlfriend and I come to you raging how evil he is, he's a monster, he's this, he's that, then, and you're saying, yeah, I know how he's such a creep, how could you better live with him? That's it. All I'm doing is increasing my negativity. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
There's not an ounce of any virtue in that. There's none of it is to help me work out my own mind. It's just to increase my anger. And the irony is I go back like a moth to a flame. That's plain ridiculous. And it pollutes your mind as well.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, if you're my friend and you support me and you love me, and I have made a decision that I'm in this relationship and, you know, some things happen, then I come to you like my friend and I talk to you to help me work out my position and what I'm feeling. That's virtue. That's completely different. So there's got to be a reason for why you have the talk. Just to badmouth and shoot my mouth off, that's no help to me or anybody else. But it's to help me sort out my mind and get courage and know what the right decision to make is. That's healthy talking and it's valid. But I've got to trust you and you've got to have integrity. Do you see my point? There's a very big difference. Even when I'm talking about my rage and he does this and my fears, I'm doing it so I can help. That's why we go to a therapist. The therapist doesn't want to know our business. They're there to help us hear ourselves. That's beneficial talking. Your motivation's got to be pure. And that's very necessary for us to do that. But usually though we think, this is the point, Andrew, we usually think we have to go to the person and tell them. That's the last person I'd tell this to. Because he's the supposed source of my suffering. So you keep your mouth shut and go to someone else and sort yourself out. Don't keep dumping on him. But sometimes it's perfectly appropriate to stand up and say something. It really is. I mean, the thing about the gunman for me, I gave him a lecture, basically. I gave him a lecture. I said, who do you think you are? I swore at him. I was like his mum, So even though if you'd heard me, you would have heard me shouting at him and abusing him. So like, who's that rude lady, Do you understand what I'm saying? It sounded terrible, but I didn't hate the guy at all. I remember it vividly. I didn't hate him. I felt I rather liked him. He was a nice boy, Do you see my point? So whatever reason I was able to tell him off, and it truly, really was for his sake. I promise you, it was so peculiar an experience. I remember it vividly. That's not a problem. That's not a problem. So you've got to know where you're coming from, and to be able to have courage to tell someone off with compassion. That really, I'm not saying I did that, but that's beneficial talking, and it's truly for the other person's sake. Like it was your child. Most mummies, like we talked yesterday, that woman who was here, there's a sentimental kindness, doing whatever the children want, letting them say what they want, do what they want. That's not kindness, that's attachment. But if you've got a role of a parent, that's a really big responsibility to be firm and clear, like tough love as we call it, coming from wisdom to help genuinely for the sake of that child to tell them off. That's a hard one, because we all know our mummies are angry and they all say to us, oh, it's for your sake, and we know it's just their anger. But to really sincerely mean that. And so that's all contextual. What kind of relationship is it? You can't do that to your boss. You don't do that to your mum. But to your child, absolutely, but it's got to come from the right place. That's evident, isn't it? And if it's our partner, I mean, that's the person we want to talk about most. We want to keep telling them off all the time. It's got to be the hardest one to not do it. I mean, it's so difficult because we love talking and it's good to have ideas, it's good to have opinions, but, we have to be wise. And I really think if you control your speech with your partner, like I talked about my family, there's no problems. There are no problems, Andrew. You work on your own mind and you shut up. I mean, it's so simple, but it's just unbearable for us, isn't it? That's right. But are we communicating here? What else? That'll do. Okay, let's talk more about karma. Go into more depth about karma. So you got my point, Kevin, the point about before, 4 tracks of karma, and they don't have a direct relationship. And that's what the biggest pain for us in our lives, because we confuse. The second kind of karma is all your own tendencies, your personality traits, who you are yourself, what you feel. You're a good person, you're negative ones, positive ones, and then how we're treated by others. We think there should be a direct relationship. So because you don't lie, you assume people should believe you. Do you understand? We'd like that, wouldn't we? And then when they don't, we go mad. Why? And it's quite true. At that moment, when you spoke the truth, but someone doesn't believe you, it's true at that moment. Within that moment, you do not deserve it. It's true. But that's where only if you have the view of karma do you have an explanation for why it happened. And that's why without the view of karma, I'm just talking, there's no explanation. The materialist, the philosophical materialist view, the materialist philosophical view of the world, at the moment there is yet no explanation. Hear the point. There's no explanation for why a bad thing should happen to a good person, except to say the person's bad. And now that's the thing, we read the newspaper article about the next serial killer, and the first thing all the journalists do is start to look into the history of the killer. And we'll say, that's why he did it. But if I'm the victim of that killer, or, my husband got killed by that killer, that explains why the killer did what he did, looking into his past, but it doesn't explain why he did it to me. And that's the question we always have, isn't it? You see my point? It doesn't answer the question, why me? And that's the question we have. Now, if you're a Christian or a Muslim, and you have real faith in God, I presume a Jew too, but I get so many confused answers from Jews. Every Jew I talk to in Israel and everywhere else, they all give me different answers. And I don't know, I think they just sound like materialists to me. They talk about God, and they never talk about heaven. They've got no idea what goes on to them when they die. I get confused about Jews. I give up asking. Okay, Andrew, I've asked. So many people in Israel, they all got different views. Never mind. But the one thing I found interesting, the Jews tell me, is that God doesn't put the soul there the moment the egg and sperm come together, which is when Jesus says God puts the soul there. But for Jews, God doesn't put, what do they call the breath of life or something, a soul into you until you're in the womb for a few months, which is why it's okay to have an abortion before you get the soul there, which makes sense, it's logical. Anyway, that was just an aside. What I'm getting at is, I always quote this story of this, when one of Air Asia's flights went into the ocean a few years ago. And all the Malaysians on the plane, mostly Muslims. So this one couple, mummy and daddy, were asked how do they feel about the death of their daughter. And they basically said, she belongs to God. He has taken her back, so we are content. Now, I think that is sublime. I would never criticise that view as a philosophy. Why? Because they've got complete faith in a creator. They know God has a plan. God does not need to share his plan with us. That's his business. We have faith in him, so he has a plan. We know he's got a plan. We trust him. That's profound. I think that's profound. That means you relax, you accept. But with the materialist philosophical view, no one's got a plan, so no wonder we're chaotic. No one's got a view yet of why bad things happen. The best to say is he got hit when he was a child. But that doesn't explain why he harmed me, and we want to know that reason, why me. And there's no answer for that. Very simple, there's no answer. We just call it bad luck, Buddha has a view, and it's called karma. So it's up to us which view we use, if any. It's up to us. And the key point about having a view is it informs the way we respond. That's the key point. That's the key point. You can't always do it. But like I said, for Tibetans, they've been brought up with it since they're born. It's been around in Asia for several thousand years. It's a worldview that's there in the bones of their beings. It's natural, So, for us, it's a powerful one if we take it on board. I've chosen to take it on board, and I can say the differences in my mind and my life have been quite powerful based upon the view that the hypothesis that my mind is not physical. It's not the handiwork of mummy, daddy, or a creator. It comes from my past, and everything I experience is the fruit of my past actions. That, for me, is the view I attempt to live according to. So, for sure, when you have that view sincerely, like that Muslims with their view, that causes your mind to be relaxed. You don't have the question. That's the point. You don't have the question, why me? Because you have an answer. That's why I always tell the story of those two young Tibetan nuns that Richard Gere invited to this meeting of ex-prisoners in New York in 2003. He invited His Holiness to come, and all these ex-prisoners, and I was among the people invited because I work with people in prison. 20 former prisoners, Americans, a whole cross-section of Americans. And he also invited these two young nuns. So it was very moving for all these Americans, to hear these young Tibetan nuns who'd been imprisoned, tortured, and sexually abused for a couple of years or something. So if anybody thought about it, you probably could argue that their suffering was more than anyone else's if you didn't quantify suffering. It was very clear. But it was vividly clear to all the Americans. These young women weren't angry. And I want to talk about this more in relation to the mind, but I can't talk about it now. It's a major point. So let's look at what anger is. This is not getting to the delusions, but it's all part of the causes of suffering. This is very much the Buddha's view. Because of this ego grasping, this root delusion, which then gives rise to this massive bottomless pit of hunger, emotional hunger, attachment, which is that I must get what I want every second. And then that gives rise, when it doesn't get what it wants, to panic attack, anxiety, anger, depression, and a whole spectrum of aversion, anxiety, annoyed, irritated, upset, angry, despair, depression. There's a whole spectrum. That's aversion. And that's the response to attachment not getting what it wants, and attachment is a response to having a ridiculous sense of a separate self in the first place. These three states of mind and this intimate hierarchical relationship. And that's the key in understanding Buddhist psychology. So anger, how dare you listen to the philosophy of it. It's a view, it's a viewpoint. It's my point to Nibbana, which we're going to get into more. It's a conceptual story deep in our bones at the level of an assumption, because we have attachment, in turn because we have ego grasping. And we've been practicing these for eons, Buddha says, so they're completely programmed in our being. And of course we never question them, because they come out as a massive emotion when the body is feeling and you're shaking and your heart is beating and you're having a panic attack. So we just think it's physical, and it's so ancient, so instinctive, because it's so practiced. So when you analyze that assumption, anger, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's obviously the view of a person who thinks they were created by their mummy and daddy. They didn't ask to get born. It's clear. No one consulted you. Could I please make you Rabina? I mean, it's a joke, but hear it. We weren't consulted. We had no say in it. These two ridiculous parents with a bunch of delusions decided to make another version of themselves and chuck me out, and then tell me when I go to the therapist that I've got to sort my own life out and forgive my parents. Well, I disagree. I'm sincere now. Don't joke. It's not a joke. If my mother and father actually did create me, please take it seriously. If they actually created this package and gave me anger and gave me depression and gave me psychosis and gave me suffering, then it is logical that you must blame them. Now, we do that, but somehow we feel guilty because our therapist says we shouldn't. I disagree. You should. Mr. What's his name? Frankenstein made the monster, didn't he? So you don't blame the poor old monster, you blame Frankenstein. He was the creator. If you have the crummy car, you have to blame Mr. Ford. You don't blame the car. It's obvious. Mr. Ford made the car. It crashed. It was a problem. So my mummy and daddy make Rabina, give her their qualities, and then punch her and beat her and do whatever. Then they are the cause of me, and so they should be accountable. I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. And anger's right. Anger is a correct response. Well, Buddha says it's insane, because it's not like that. It's a fantasy. We've made it up. They didn't make you. They gave you a body. How kind. The rest you brought yourself. God didn't make you either. That's the Buddha's view. So if you have that sincerely, like those young Tibetan nuns, it's in their bones since they're born, that informed their ability to bear their pain and their suffering. They have a reason why they were tortured. This is very outrageous in our culture. All we think of is this is blaming the victim, Nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that at all. It's a view that informs your own ability to explain to yourself why it happened, which informs your ability to deal with it and to stop suffering. It's practical, So they didn't have that view. They didn't have the thought, why is this happening to me? Whereas we think that's a natural thought to come. That's only because we have these other views that inform it. If you have faith in God, if you really have faith in God, and probably most Christians don't, they blame God as well. If you really have faith in God, you'd be like those two Muslims. You'd accept, because God has a plan. That, for me, is profound. Way more profound than the materialist one. Because then you accept. Because God, it's like you trust somebody. That's amazing. That's incredible. But the Buddha says, no, it's not that either. Everything you experience is the fruit of your past seeds, and everything, good or bad. Now, the interesting point about this is, this assumption of anger is I don't deserve it, and how dare you do it to me. But what's it based on? The hubris of attachment, which says that I deserve happiness. Attachment says I deserve happiness, and anger says I don't deserve suffering. But there's no logic to it. So just like you would not go to your bank account and say, I deserve dollars, why doesn't someone give me dollars? You don't say that because it's your bank account. So you know the onus is on you to put the dollars there. So you wouldn't have the thought, how dare that happen? I deserve dollars. And you wouldn't look in your garden and say, who put weeds in my garden? But that's the view we have in the materialist view. It's like conspiracy theory. Someone does it to us, you know. It's conspiracy theory. It's ridiculous. The Buddha says your garden is the fruit of your past actions, or your life is your garden, baby. So when you have that view very strongly, the karma, it lessens the hubris and arrogance and entitlement of I deserve happiness. When we all believe that's true, it's like some human right. There's a human right. It's not a human right. It's not a right. It's the right to be happy? I'm not sure. No. We all want happiness. That's better. We're all driven by the wish for happiness. That's perfect. We're all driven by the wish to not suffer. That's correct. But you've got to know the causes. That's the key, the piece that's missing. Whereas we have an assumption that you're born with the right for happiness and not suffering. That's assuming someone else does it to you. That's we have attachment. You'd better give me happiness, please. I deserve it. And we don't care. We don't care, actually, if we deserve it. Just give me more, please. Whereas if we get the suffering, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's a philosophical position. Attachment and aversion are philosophical positions coming directly from the view of an inherent I. It's quite subtle stuff, you know. Got to unpack these things. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Attachment is this junkie that assumes I'd better get the good things. So it's like greedy. But there's no cause. If you don't do the right thing, you won't get flowers in your garden. If you don't work hard, you won't get dollars in your bank. So you don't say you deserve them. It's not relevant. You only deserve it if you do it. If you create the causes, then you deserve it. Yeah, you do. But it's not how we think. Not at all. These young women, they're at the end of their story, they were crying, and they were talking about their suffering and their torture, not angry. And then they said, or one of them said, you know, and of course we had compassion for our torturers. Because we knew we must have harmed them in the past. And because they will suffer in the future. That's the view of karma. So the point here, with the karmic view, the first level, you get yourself, you put together yourself, understand why, what, suffering's this, suffering's that, happiness that, causes this, I do this, therefore that. So you learn to use this law of botany to help you interpret your garden now and then to tell you what to do to get a good garden in the future. It's really obvious. That's karma. Then that's for your sake. And now you look at others and you go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Look at these suffering sentient beings. Due to their past actions, they're now suffering, and the worst one is they blame everybody else. This is the part that's hard, and this is not palatable in our culture. It is not palatable. It's insane view. It's monstrous, because we hear it through the lenses of punishment and reward, which is not valid. So take time to think it through and observe it in our mind, you know. Are we communicating here? Good. So it's not easy. Because, you know, the main one in Buddhism is accountability. We're the boss. We created ourselves. That's massive. That's what brings self-respect and courage and confidence and the ability to know I have to make choices. But when we're in the victim mode, victim by definition, and I'm not saying we don't suffer, because when we're victims, we suffer unbearably, and there are millions of people on this planet who are totally victimized, it's no question. Bullies are harming people, brutalizing, torturing, terrorizing, raping daily. There's no doubt about that. No one's arguing with that. But the Buddhist view is an explanation of why. Equally, see, this is the interesting point too. We can also look at the world and see lots of good things happen. We can look into our lives and count the number of good things. We never, ever, ever, ever ask the question, why do good things happen? We only, because why? And that's, again, the proof. We ask the question, why do bad things happen? Because we assume we don't deserve them. But we never ask the question, why do good things happen? Because we assume we just deserve them and it's just normal life. Give me more, please. We don't care whether we deserve it, just we want more. So it's arrogance. Like I said, it's like hubris. When we ask the question, why do good things happen, we would be fainting with bliss and joy. And it's unbelievable. This is logic. The fact that we have a decent human body is like a miracle in the first place. The fact that we've got some access to some virtue and intelligence and wisdom to make choices is like a miracle. That's due to past practice. The fact that we've got reasonable health is like a miracle. The fact that we have good friends and kind, supportive, have a house to live in, a mattress to sleep on, food, money in the bank, a person who gives us a job, a bank that gives us credit. This is like, all these are like miracles. They are all the fruit of our past generosity, non-stealing, non-killing, non-harming, non-lying. They're the fruit of our own actions. We just take them for granted because we assume they're our human right. That's arrogance. We take them for granted. We would be blissed out with joy if we looked every day at the good things and realized that we created them. It's like you've got acres of beautiful vegetables and cauliflowers and roses, but you just assume they're your right, and you greedily eat them up, never thinking who sowed them, never thinking who grew them, but they're the fruit of your past hard work. I mean, how arrogant of you, how foolish of you. You forget that you did it. You greedily eat them up, assuming it's your right, and you forget to sow more. You'd end up with nothing. That's the tragedy. We don't see our lives like that. That's the way to think about karma. You apply it to the good things. We're obsessed with the bad, you know, because we don't want the bad. We have enough reason to be blissed out. That's so much good fortune that we have. And it's not good luck. No one gave it to you. It's not a gift. It's not the universe doing it to you. It's your own. It's the fruit of your past virtue. So every time someone believes your word, it's a fruit of not lying. Every time someone gives you something, it's a fruit of your generosity. Every time you get credit in a bank, it's a fruit of your generosity and your non-stealing. Simple things that we just assume are our human right. But this, don't take them for granted, please. That's shocking. It's shocking, because that means you never learn from it. So the same way when you understand botany, botany refers to the weeds and the herbs, the weeds and the flowers. We never forget that. But with our lives we do. It's a really powerful, simple point. What happened?
For some of the stuff that we have.
What, darling? What, Kevin?
Okay, so let's say some of the stuff that we have, even our
I beg your pardon, start again.
Okay. Some of the possessions that we have, for example.
Some of our possessions.
For example, even the iPhone that we hold in our pocket is made from suffering of other people who are working in these hard conditions.
This is true.
Even our clothes, our garments.
Yeah, and the vegetables we eat, like we talked. Then,
and also the foreign policy decision that our government has made.
all these things. So question, good, exactly.
That come from suffering.
Yes. So
and
question.
We are indirectly benefiting from suffering.
In that sense, you can't argue. Yes, you can't argue. So question.
That was a point more than a question. Even
I know, but you have to. It's helpful to ask a question from it. Okay. So, because you've got to have an action point. A question brings an action point.
Okay, so would that be bad karma? The mere fact that I'm enjoying my iPhone, or I'm enjoying.
No, it's the same as listen, darling. It's the same as the vegetables. Keep it simple.
Okay.
Those vegetables we eat.
Yeah.
Even the meat you eat, if you decide to eat meat, it is definitely as a result of the suffering of sentient beings.
Yeah.
This is a given. But it's a given, not an exception. We think of it in commercial terms, in the world terms, in political terms, in Chinese workers and $4 an hour, whatever. That's how we think of it. But the whole world is this way. It is everything is interdependent. So when we know this from the point of view of karma, we appreciate that everything we experience is the fruit of our past virtue. That's why you get an iPhone. That's why you have a good meal. That's your own virtue that you're even able to have it. But then you realise it's on the back of sentient being suffering. Yeah. So then you have compassion, and you try to use it with wisdom and compassion, and try to want to repay the kindness of sentient beings. Because you can't have any action, anything that isn't the result of the work of sentient beings. You can't have it. We do as much as we can. As much as we can. So if you know certain, like that's why you'd at least attempt not to have that lobster boiled alive directly for you. It's going to get boiled alive for the next person, but you sort of protect your own karma. You don't want to be involved in the slaughter, the boiling alive of a lobster. So at least you limit some of the actions you do, but never think that you're not going to be harming others. So that's why you become more conscious. You have more compassion, and you wish to repay their kindness. You try to devote your life to benefiting others and being moral, etc., etc. What can you do? What choice do you have? What choice? No choice. No choice.
Live in a cave.
And even then, you're still going to, the sentient beings are going to be sitting underneath you. They're going to squash under your arms, and they're going to be, you breathe them in. So we've got to be aware of this. Everything's interdependent, So be conscious of it. And that makes us much more aware. And first, karmically protect yourself, and then have compassion, and do the best we can with knowledge. You understand? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we looked a little bit at how you define a negative action. Negative action is one you do with the grossest level, with your body and speech that harms another, motivated by a delusion. So in general, an action that harms another is an action that harms another. But whether you create negative karma or the extent of your negative karma is dependent on your mind involved in and your motivation. So it's two separate things. So in general, at the first level of practice, there's no wiggle room. You just try not to kill. You try not to steal. You try not to lie. That's it. And when you get to more advanced level, you start to be able to work with your delusions. And when you get to the compassion wing, then even you can do actions there that would look like they harm others, but are based on a virtuous motivation. Even just a tough love one is a good example. And that's more advanced. First level, you just train your mind and body and speech to be just disciplined. Really, it's the basis of practice. This is the foundation, the basis. Practice of discipline of benefit of living in morality. But now there's an extra special powerful way to do that, and that is to live in vows. Buddha loves his vows, he loves his vows. So a vow is a decision, a conscious, intentional decision to refrain from doing certain actions of body and speech. Vows are always about behavior. They're not about the mind. The mind's involved, but it's about behavior, controlling your behavior. So the first level of vows, they're called the pratimoksha vows, individual liberation. These are the vows such that if we live with these, that would be the 5 lay vows for the lay person, and the monks and nuns vows. These are all to help us control our body and speech so that we don't create more negative karma, so that we can get the benefit in the future. That's the basis. First level of practice. Then the next level of vows in the Bodhisattva path are also about behavior, but they are all determined by the motivation. They're more spacious, and they are all, the first lot are related to helping me not harm others so that I don't have future suffering. The next lot of vows are to help me help others. So there you have a vow, for example, to even break an earlier vow if it's genuinely for the sake of that person. So these are more spacious and more wise. You know, they involve the mind in more spaciously, but you've got to be ready for that, like we were saying before to Andrew. So here then, the Buddha would say, Lama Zopa said one time, you could have 2 people, one person doing bucket loads of practice, but doesn't even have a vow to not kill. Have another person merely keeping a vow not to kill. He says the power of vows is such that the person merely keeping their vow not to kill is creating infinite more virtuous karmic imprints in their mind 24 hours a day, and putting atomic bombs under their habits to kill, for example. And whereas the first person, even though they do lots of practice, there's not much virtue because the motivation is weak, whereas vows give this extra power to actions that we do. So this might just sound like religion, but let's see if we can describe this, look at it logically. I mean, first of all, Buddha says that a vow in the mind stream of a person is like, it is a subtle physical form visible to clairvoyance. So it's quite tasty. And the point about a vow is, okay, use example. If we're sitting in this room now and we're not killing anything, right? That might be true. Now the reason, first of all, we're not killing anybody or anything right now is we've created such good karma in the past, good non-killing karma, that we can be in a situation at this moment where no one's threatening us. Like ants aren't crawling all over us, the cockroaches aren't coming, the rats aren't eating our toes, you know, the rapists aren't coming in trying to jump on us, the terrorists aren't coming in attacking us. You can't hear my point. We're sitting in a very peaceful, relaxed environment. That's the fruit of our past virtue. But we're not creating any more virtue from it. We're just resting on our laurels. So we've got to keep that going. We've got to keep sowing more seeds. So the only time we will sow the seed of non-killing, and by the way, just when we die, we need bucket loads of delicious, rich, non-killing karmic seeds in our bank vault, because they're the ones that we need to ripen to give us the next human birth. So the only time we will create the virtue of not killing is, like we said before, when we have the intention not to kill. And the only time you have the intention not to kill is when there's a sentient being in front of you that you decide, oh, I must not kill it. So unless your ex-boyfriend's next to you and you're refraining from killing him, you're not creating any virtuous karma of non-killing. It's got to be intentional. It's a really powerful point. We're not killing, but we're not creating any virtue because there's no thought to not kill. Can you hear that point? Because karma's the thought. Karma's mind. So if you meet that ant and you think, I better avoid it, that moment only is when you create some merit of not killing. But because our compassion is fairly weak, until we're bodhisattvas, our wisdom and compassion are really weak, our motivation's fairly weak, we don't create very strong karmic imprints. Whereas, Buddha says, if you live in a vow not to kill, which you take in front of somebody after you've taken refuge, and because that person got it from their teacher, who got it from their teacher, who got it from their teacher, and you could literally track back this unbroken chain of, like a power source of real human beings all the way back to the Buddha. I find that kind of powerful. So as I've been given permission by my Lama, he got it from his. And he, so it's like a living power source of people, real humans, right back to Buddha 2.5 thousand years ago. I find that very tasty. That's like a lineage, isn't it? I mean, it's the same. I learned music from my mummy. Where'd she get it from? Her teacher. Where'd she get it from? Her teacher. And you can track that to Bach. If there's any break in that lineage, music is dead. This is the power of a lineage. It's like a continuity. It's very powerful of human knowledge passed on to each person. So, you know, I've been given permission by Lama Zopa, for example, for me to do that. So I got it from him. It's powerful. So anyway, when I took refuge, I sat in front of somebody, Lama Yeshe, on my knee, repeating after him 3 times, taking refuge, Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and then took the lay vows. So then when you do that, what you're doing is putting these powerful seeds in your mind, such that 24 hours a day, you're keeping your vows, even when you're not thinking about it. That's the power of the vow. It's so stupendous psychologically in your mind. Because what you've done is, you've made a strong decision. I will never kill. From now until the time of my death, I will never kill. I will never lie. I will never steal. And you mean it sincerely. And to break it, it has to be, to break a vow, you've got to have the intention to break it, not care, have no interest in caring, and no wish to fix it. That's an unusual thing. We often just weaken our vows. But the vow is such that it's there in your mind stream, kind of protecting you, the way the Lamas say, the way the Buddha says, sorry, the Buddha. So it's very powerful to take vows. And it's an easy way to purify your mind and to create merit, apparently. And the bottom line of practice is you've got to create merit, which simply means sow good seeds and purify the bad seeds. That's it. You've got to pull out the weeds and grow the flowers. That's it. And living in vows is a very potent way to accomplish that. So it's easy peasy. Very easy way to do that for ordinary people, for all of us. In fact, the Lamas say, Buddha says you can't get ahead without vows. You just can't. Our virtue is not strong enough. That's why our virtue is not strong enough. Because remember, we said, with normal karma, your motivation is the key factor that determines if it's very virtuous or not. So if our virtue is not that strong, and it's not until we realise emptiness of bodhicitta, then our motivation is quite weak. Whereas with a vow, the vow is so potent, even without a motivation, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds 24 hours a day and purifying your mind 24 hours a day. So that's a stupendous and easy way to have a spiritual life. You can relax, put your feet up, watch television, eat popcorn. I'm serious. Because as long as you've got vows, you're ticking over virtue. It's really simple. You can't get ahead of the game. Being good is not enough, Lama says. It's not enough. Because delusions are so ancient, you know, so habitual. Yep.
What if you break a vow? Is that really negative karma?
Yes, it is. But then if you break it, sincerely decide, I'm going to kill the ant. You see the ant, you know you've got a vow, you consciously decide, I don't care, I'm going to kill it anyway, and you have no interest in fixing it. So it's quite heavy to do that. It's unusual if we do take a vow not to kill, that we break it like that. We weaken it if we just get lazy. And so of course it's more heavy when you break, but to break is quite heavy. And it's unusual if we do. I mean, if you take the vows too lightly, then it's likely you'll break it. But if we take it seriously and understand what we're doing, it really is a protection. And I think it makes sense, you know. I mean, it's an intention for a start, a strong intention. So for example, we just know in our lives, just a simple example, I'll go, oh yeah, I must go on a diet one day. For 27 years you must go on a diet. And then one day you say, I will go on a diet. Guess what? Then you'll do it, and that protects you. Every time you see the food, you've got this vow sitting here. You've made a vow to yourself. It's really, that's the power of a vow. It protects you, and it determines the choices you make. Every second you put the food there, you've remembered that vow you've made, and it'll determine what you do. That's the power of a vow. But it's just, I should or I would, that's not enough. It's not enough. So it's very powerful, very powerful. So breaking it, of course, and then that's why we have to, the next step practice we have to do, the next practice we have to do in junior school. First one, entry level, junior school, grade 1, urgent level of practice, back off and try not harm sentient beings. Second one, live in vows, to do that in a stupendous way. Third, we need to purify the seeds we've already planted in countless past lives that haven't yet ripened as my suffering. And that's called purification. And we do that at the end of the day. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do that every day. And we'll discuss that later. So this is first level, this is ground level, basic, foundation, but powerful. And all our practice from here builds upon this. Builds upon this. Refraining from harming in the context of vows and purifying negative karma before it ripens. And then doing a little bit of practice every day. You have a fantastic practice with just that much. You can guarantee that when you die and have a good death and your karma takes care, you get another decent human life and keep on bopping. It's powerful. But to rush off and do holy practices and meditate all day and think of things and look at the deities and do mantras, without this, there's no foundation. There's no basis. It won't grow. It's impossible. So we've got to understand this incremental levels of practice. It's so important, you know. Do you understand, people? Any questions? Yes.
Athena, just with lying,
Oh dear. What?
I have a question about lying.
Lying. Okay, good. Go on.
Yeah. Because often I feel like if I'm if I'm choosing to withhold information, that's still
You've got to give me an
lying.
example. It's the only way to do it. Simple example, please. On the earth. If you can't even think of one, you surely had one in your mind, an example. No, it's the only way to give you an example. Think of a simple example, darling.
Okay.
Huh?
I've gone really blank.
I know you have. So can we just think of something, a simple example? I mean, in relation to your mother, your boyfriend.
Okay, let's use mum.
So okay, let's use your mum. And you're a lesbian. She can't bear the thought of you being a lesbian. I wouldn't know if you're a lesbian. I'm just saying. Just a say. So you mean you withhold the fact that you're a lesbian?
Or like you tell part of a story, or like you choose to.
You mean you like girls, but you're not a lesbian? What do you mean? Come on, use an example.
Okay.
I mean, you're the one being precise when you haven't got an example.
Yeah, no, yeah, I get what you're saying.
But
Okay,
what?
I don't know what's going on. I've gone really
But you
blank.
said that, so you have to have some thought there that caused you to say it.
Well, I can't think of a specific example, but often I feel like I overshare information. Like I tell, I
Oh, I see,
so,
because you think you're telling the truth.
yeah, and then people, like my best friends are like, you don't need to say everything all the time.
There you go, but that's true. That's true. So that's a bit of a different issue. That's just pouring out our heart, wanting to be heard. That's not telling the truth. I think that's when we've all got that. We've all got attachment to be seen and liked by people. So what impels us to speak half the time, want people to know, want people to hear us so they can like us. I mean, it sounds a bit silly, we'll go into this later. It's a more subtle level of attachment. But the one in relation to like your mum, not telling you the truth that you're a lesbian, let's say, that's not lying. That's not lying. Lying, the opposite of lying isn't speaking everything. That's completely naive. Lying is consciously deciding to mislead a person, always for your own sake. Lying only is ever for your own sake, because you want to put yourself up somehow. That's what lying does. So not telling your mum a truth about your life is not lying.
Because it's deceiving.
What do you mean by good? Okay, please analyse. What do you mean by deceiving, please?
Well, okay, so I'm not lying.
But why should you think? Okay, the question is, why do you think your mother has to know every tiny truth about your life? Give me some logical reasons for that. Why? Give me a reason. Why? That's the point. Why?
Because otherwise, am I lying?
Excuse me, I didn't say that. Why would you think? Okay, if she says to you, "Are you a lesbian?"
Okay.
Then you have to decide a wise answer.
Yep.
But by not telling, no, really, this is a crucial point, darling.
Yeah.
Lying is a conscious, proactive thing coming out your mouth,
Yeah, okay.
or misleading a person by certain things. But really, the main thing of a lie is you're speaking a lie to put yourself up and to put to mislead a person. That's heavy. But to not tell every time, in other words, you're thinking every time you get constipation, you've got to tell your mother, "I've got constipation, Mum, otherwise I'm lying." Don't be ridiculous. This is naivety about it. We don't have to tell everybody everything. And the fact is, we've got to have self-respect, So if a person in front of you who's 7 years old, you don't talk about what your latest knowledge in computer science. It's just, you're not lying. It's not relevant for their mind. You're not telling your mum everything. You have to know your mum's mind, love your mother for who she is, know she's got these prejudices and fears and dramas. But at the same time, also, this is where we get very confused. We feel we have to come out to everybody. If you've been hiding it and you think your mother should know, somehow I think that's a bit mean, frankly. But we have such a craving to be seen. We want other people to see us who we really are. So we expose ourselves brutally to everybody. That's just kind of childish, I think. If I know who I am, nobody on the planet needs to know, but we have this craving that other people know who we are. And I don't think that's necessary. When we're really content in ourselves, you don't need to tell people what you are. If I didn't wear robes and I didn't speak Buddhist words, no one ever have to know I'm a Buddhist. It's my own private business. My own private business. So that comes from contentment and working on controlling your body and speech and being content with who you are. And then, according to a person's space where they're at, you tell them something. So if you genuinely think it's beneficial for your mum, and you risk it, and you tell her, and you accept the consequences. But not lying doesn't mean speaking everything you think. That's naive. But having a mind that's duplicitous and trying to hide things, you've got to be careful of that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's important to think it through. And you can be skillful. When people say to me, oh, what if my girlfriend says, do you like my dress? And you don't, but you say, oh, I don't like it. Isn't that a lie? No, come on. That's not trying to put yourself up. If you don't like, you will say, oh, Doreen, you like my new haircut? Now, if you love me and trust me, and I love you and trust you, I might say, no, it's ridiculous. And you will learn, and you'll be okay with that. But otherwise, just say, you look gorgeous, darling. Just on lying, please, give me a break. Just Sam.
Yeah.
What else? What else? Anything else? Questions about karma?
So just going on that point about vows.
Yeah.
So like a butcher will kill like from 7 a.m. to
That's right.
3 or 4.
That's right. Well, the old-fashioned
But
butchers.
then they won't kill after that.
Won't they?
They won't. Well, what I mean is they won't kill from when they knock off at 4
Oh,
o'clock.
not from work, yeah. That's the person who kills the animals.
Till the next morning.
That's the person in the slaughterhouse, isn't it? In the abattoir, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Whereas the
So
person
then-
who takes vows,
Yeah.
they're getting the merit for 24, well, during the same period.
Yeah, there you go. So that's so this Buddhist view about, yeah, this is the power of vows.
Because, between like 4 p.m., let's say, and 7 a.m.,
There's no killing coming.
there's no killing coming
No.
for both.
But you see, I think what's interesting is this, though. Just thinking about it. If your job is to go fishing, let's say, or any job that is to you directly killing, it's your job. My feeling is, it's not quite exactly the same, but it's like you so define it. We all define ourselves in terms of our job, don't we? Oh, I'm a butcher. I'm a fisherman. I'm a sniper in the army. I'm a typist, we'll say, whatever. So we identify ourselves by that job. So that my sense is, that's why it will be much heavier to have a job that's called a fisherman than to go fishing occasionally. Because every second even when you're not fishing, you're still thinking in terms of your job being a fisherman, working out when the boat's going to be free and what this and what day and the sun coming up and in the weather. Everything you're thinking about is all determined, is informed by this job you're doing. So then even the things you do, even casually, it's informed by you being a fisherman. So everything is kind of polluted by the heavy action. That's the same as a vow in the good way. So occasionally not killing is good, and occasionally killing is not good. But living in a vow not to kill is more stupendous, and it's like living in a vow to kill, it's more heavy. So that's one point I want to make, just makes more sense, because all your decisions as a fisherman, even when you're not fishing, what time you have your lunch, when you go out, when you go to the carpenter to make your boat, it's all to do with being a fisherman. So it's heavier, isn't it? Yeah. Because karma's second by second, millisecond by millisecond. Every millisecond you're creating karma.
Just and one other thing about going back to the vegetarian vegans today. Is it a heavier karma if you eat a larger animal compared to a smaller animal?
Yeah, they say all these things, That's to do with the amount of suffering of the creature you kill.
Right.
So when you kill an ant, because you're so big and the ant's so tiny, it'll die in a millisecond. But if if it's a big elephant and you have to sort of stab it to death, I mean, sometimes there's going to be more suffering, Or the more, you could say the more, and we put it this way, the more brains they've got, the more physicality they've got, the more suffering there is, because there's more suffering. So the more the creature suffers, that impacts upon the karma you create. For sure it does. For sure it does. There's many factors. I just mentioned 4, but there's so many factors. There's so many. I mean, it's so intricate. Everybody in this room, we can all have a piece of meat on the plate, 4 actions to make it a complete action. The piece of meat on the plate, the intention to eat it, motivation, do the action, and then eat the food, which is called an action of eating food and eating meat. But based upon each of us, our own karma, our own past, our own conditions, our motivation, every single action will be like an individual, completely different action with different components and different results, because we're all so different. There's so many things contingent. Do you understand? It's so complex. I remember one time, one of my lamas had lunch with somebody, and the person offered meat for the lunch, and the attendant said, "I'm a vegetarian," and the lama said, "You eat that meat." So this is the thing again when we get fundamentalist about not even touching an oxo cube. That's just self-centered. It's not to benefit animals. I'm sorry. It's not to benefit. It's just self-centered. I'm a vegetarian. How dare you offer me meat? It's disgusting. But that's for the sake of the person. There's kindness. If you go to your grandma's and she bought a lamb chop and it cost her money and she doesn't know you're a vegetarian, excuse me, who do we think we are not to eat it? Okay, these days we're more neurotic about food and it's all up front. But in a way, that's an action of generosity. What is it going to do to you if you eat a lamb chop? I mean, any of you become vegans, I mean, it's shocking to say this, isn't it? If you're a vegan. It's shocking to hear this, right? Any vegans here? I'm trying to be personal, it doesn't matter. See what I'm saying? We're so fanatic about it. If there's even a shred of animal something in it. I mean, if you have an allergy and die, that's okay, like the peanut one, you know? We're so fanatic about it. In my opinion, it's really fanatic, it's really obsessive. It's my opinion, okay? It's not Buddhist, it's my opinion. Out of kindness to the other person, please. Eat the damn lamb chop. Come on. It's my opinion, okay? Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yes.
It's kindness for the other person. You know, it's kindness for the other person. How incredible. How kind they are. I'll bring you lunch, you know? There's more to it than merely eating or not eating, as we said before. Why don't we have a cup of tea? And cake. What have you got for pudding today?
Oh, no pudding. This
What is it,
afternoon, the vegetarians are going to be very happy. We
What
have
is it?
dips and crudities and fruit.
Coming with that cup of tea?
Yes.
How wonderful.
Oh, and there's also leftovers from this morning.
From this morning. I'll have a feast, please. Go and have a feast.